And now, you're tuned into RBLR, the home of Tampa Bay's RBLR Sports.
Hello, everyone out there in Tampa Bay and beyond. This is James Knowles coming at you for the RBLR Sports podcast to cover the Tampa Bay Rowdies. This is what I do every week, and I am here every week with Carlos Rueda. Carlos, how are you doing this Tuesday evening?
James, I'm in my Tuesday best. Threw on a tie over my Ecuador jersey today. It's a big weekend of sports coming up, James. It's a big one. Ecuador is back. World Cup qualifiers on Friday against Brazil in Brazil, a big one. Rowdies got another game this weekend after a week off that I think came at a great time. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And another game for Ecuador against Peru next week. Non-soccer related, USF football has a game away to Alabama. If you care about college football, it's one to watch this weekend. Tampa Bay area getting represented on the big national spotlight in the world of college football. A lot of stuff going on, James. A lot of stuff. How about you? What's going on? I'm excited.
Yeah, I am also excited for the international soccer. Everybody knows that I love international soccer. And the U.S. men's national team is getting together for what appears to be a rather experimental camp because we are waiting for the head coach to be confirmed. It is very likely that that will happen this week from what I've read. So I'm crossing my fingers and toes, and then he'll be able to see over this experimental roster in our friendlies as we actually hopefully gear up to host the World Cup rather well in a couple of years. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves, Carlos, because the Rowdies are the ones. Yeah, the Rowdies are the ones that we are focusing on, and they have a game much sooner than any of that. They have a game this Saturday, and that is what we are actually here to talk about. We don't have any reviews to do, as everyone knows who listened last week. We did not preview a game for this past weekend, so I guess we'll just skip over that section. But we do want to talk about where the team is now that we're in September, because it's actually getting real close to the playoffs, which is pretty surprising, but here we are. And we'll do that before we do our preview of the game this Saturday when the Rowdies will travel out to Colorado. If we have any Colorado listeners or any Colorado RBLR Sports members, at least one in particular, just know that the Rowdies will be in that state to be so that you can cheer them on there. Also, we would like to say the next RBLR watch party is Saturday, September 21st. We will be playing Charleston Battery in Charleston, so RBLR will be hosting our own watch party in Berry House in Ybor. Please join us at the Berry House Beer Company, where they have award-winning beers. The pregame show starts at 6:45. The game itself starts at 7:30. There will be a halftime swag giveaway as well as beer pitcher specials. That is what we do when we go to Berry House, and that is how they help us out to bring more fans in the door and more fans for the Tampa Bay Rowdies, we hope. So please join us there. We will have more about that, obviously, on our social media, as well as when we get through the rest of this podcast. Now, let's get started with everything else. Beforehand, really quickly, just ask you to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, any major podcast platform, wherever you listen. And of course, social media, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, wherever you are, we are at RBLR Sports. So please check us out there as well. You can get in on the conversation, send us tweets, send us comments, send us notes, whatever you have in mind. We will take it into consideration. We will go through that. We have done that for several weeks right now, and it's actually been pretty cool. But Carlos, let's get into that, where the team is right now, and start with a standings update.
Of course, James. There's nothing to review. Let's get quick. Oh my goodness, I can't speak English, James. I'm a little tired. Let's take a quick look at the table, standings around the league. Some big games were played this weekend. Obviously, the Rowdies were not amongst them, but Oakland got a 1-0 win against New Mexico United in the battle of top three teams out west, in a good one. Miami got another win, by the way. That's kind of crazy. That's only their third win on the year in 26 games. And it was against Monterrey, a team that we struggled against. Take that with a grain of salt. And North Carolina FC in Louisville City, James, were in a barn burner of a game. This one finished 4-6 in favor of Louisville City. If you weren't watching that game, you missed out on a lot. There was 3 own goals, a penalty, goals from the 11th minute all the way late into the game until the 80th minute. Like, it was Goals upon goals in this one.
I don't know
Upon-
how you have 3 own goals in a game. That just doesn't
Yeah.
make sense to me. The Euros own leading goal scorer own goal apparently has joined us in the USL Championship.
Yeah, big transfer that went under the radar for sure. The own goal making its way to the USL Championship. It's crazy. 3 own goals in one game. Louisville got the benefit of 2 of them. It's kind of crazy to think if North Carolina just doesn't score those 2 own goals, they come out with a point, 4-4 instead of 4-6. That being said, North Carolina got the benefit of one of those own goals from Louisville City's part. So that was a barn burner. Do yourself a favor and go look at those highlights. I don't know how they compacted all of 10 of those goals into 8 minutes of highlights. It's truly impressive, and I think some kudos to the USL office for doing that. That's a fun one. Go look at that game if you have a chance. Zooming out, the table doesn't change much out in our neck of the woods in the Eastern Conference. Louisville still out in first place, 56 points with 2 games in hand against Charleston, who have 53 points. The Rowdies are behind Charleston, 10 points behind to be exact, but 2 games in hand on our friends over in South Carolina. In fourth place, Detroit City is hot on our tails with 38 points, 5 points back. They played 1 extra game, and so has Rhode Island, who's right behind them, 1 point behind Detroit. Fun fact, Georgetown alum. This guy's a kid, James. This guy's literally it's insane to me. He was a freshman at Georgetown. Jack Paniotu went to New England. He's been back on loan. He's been on loan on and off at Rhode Island.
Yeah.
He's had a bunch of great games. Made his way back to Rhode Island now, and he has been a key contributor every time he's touched the field with Rhode Island. So keep an eye on this kid. Keep an eye on Jack Paniotu and Rhode Island, who's sneaking their way up the Eastern Conference table. Very under the radar. A team that's kind of putting together some great results, sneaking up on Detroit, and is certainly in contention now for a top 4 finish in that 4th place spot. Keep an eye on them. Out west, not much movement either. New Mexico United is still in first place despite losing to Oakland with 48 points. Sacramento is on their tail with a game in hand, 7 points back with 41 points. Oakland Roots 1 point behind them. 2 games extra, actually. They played 26 games with 40 points. Again, the Dom Dwyer effect. I'm telling you, James. Turned the season around for Oakland. 4th place, Memphis 901 FC, 39 points. And Las Vegas still hanging in there. A team that nobody really thought anything of. Had that ownership change this offseason, is still kind of in the mix. Certainly for a playoff spot. Even more so, again, another team that kind of came out of nowhere for a top 4 finish potentially here. Just 1 point behind Oakland with a game in hand. 1 point behind Memphis with a game in hand. This is a fun one, James. I mean, it's shaping up to be a great battle here for some of these playoff spots with only, between 8 and 10 games to play for a variety of these teams. Keep an eye on how this league shapes up. I think a lot of the top places seem to be sort of locked in, but it's that bottom part of the playoff positions that are going to be really fascinating to keep an eye on. Some great games coming up in the next several weeks for those. Okay. More importantly, James, we have a game this weekend. We'll talk about that in a little bit here. But let's take a minute here. Instead of reviewing a game that we would usually have in this part of our podcast, let's take a minute to reflect on where we are currently. We have 9 games left, 4 of which at home, obviously, meaning 5 of those are away. I can do good math, apparently. And one of those this weekend, again, in Colorado Springs, altitude, tough game, team in pretty good form. Where do you think we are at this point in the year, James? 9 games left relative to where we might have thought we would be at this point in the year. Maybe thinking about it from where we would have. Okay, I can't speak English. Let's start over. James, at the beginning of the year, you and I had pretty high expectations. Let's put it this way. Are we living up to those with 9 games left in the season?
That's a really good way to put it, because I think that anybody looking at where the Rowdies sit in the table, in the Eastern Conference, in the playoff races, all of those individual and collective pieces, I think that the Rowdies are doing pretty well. Obviously, I think that the Rowdies are doing what any of us before the season started would have expected. 3rd place is not bad. And just as you and I were going over before we actually started recording, Carlos, 3rd place, if it ended today, we would be guaranteed at least 1 home game in the playoffs. And depending on how things shake out, it could turn into more, although it would probably be unlikely because Charleston and Louisville are, of course, doing very well. And I think that they would be able to win their own home games. So that's something to keep in mind. However, you and I also know, Carlos, that there is more to it than that, because third place it's not just third place. And we're doing well in that, but I think that there are a lot of problems that you and I have noticed, and especially recently, which is, of course, not good considering the timing and considering when we're at right now in September and getting close to the playoffs that we have just been talking about. So, Carlos, there was a long time during the course of the season where we said the Rowdies have a real big problem away from home. And then I think you and I actually looked at this a little bit differently, and we said, in fact, our record away from home is kind of comparative, kind of similar to a lot of the teams, including Louisville City. I think that they only have, well, based on last weekend, that might have changed. So they might have 3 wins away from home, if I'm not mistaken. But that's certainly nothing that just stands out, blows us out of the water in that particular statistic. Going into it, I think that what it actually shows us right now is that the Rowdies probably have a problem at home as much as they do away from home. And what we're looking at right now is a team that has a lot of great pieces to it, naturally, has a lot of potential, of course, but right now we are also having quite a bit of trouble putting all of that together. In particular, our strikers have gone through a cold patch, which includes Manuel Arteaga, even though he scored in the last 2 games that the Rowdies have played. I would still say that one of those being a consolation. The other one that was assisted by Damian Rivera. That was probably a little more standout. But the one beforehand, that was in the loss to Detroit City. That was just a consolation goal, and it really didn't count for all that much, which is unfortunate, because if we'd gone on and maybe pressed for another goal in the last couple of minutes, like Birmingham Legion did against us in the Open Cup, possibly we could have at least got a point out of that one. So, yeah, there are all of these issues behind them as well. And I wouldn't say necessarily that the Rowdies have been found out. I don't think that there was much to find out between where we started this season, the way that we've played over the course of the last several months, and now. I think that any team coming into play us recently knew what they were going to get. I just think that there is possibly a bit of an issue with the team in terms of its ability to turn good chances into actual goals. And then on the other end, unfortunately, it's actually been a bit of a problem for us defensively. Now, I think the Rowdies have had a reputation in recent years for being pretty good defensively and keeping a lot more goals out of the net than maybe they should. Jordan Farr, the last time that I spoke with him, I think after the Detroit City game, he told me that this was something that they needed to look in the mirror and they needed to take responsibility. All of those things that we hear when teams are going through tough patches. But we're going to see this weekend whether or not all of that actually came to fruition, of course, and you and I would hope that it does. But if the problems defensively do not work themselves out, we do hope that that is the case. But if those continue to pop up, you and I have noted that Freddie Kleeman has had some tough games. Zane Bubb has come on recently for more spot minutes, and we're actually not seeing as much of him as we might have expected based off of what we said recently. Mm-hmm. Aaron Guillen went down with an injury before this past weekend, which was a bye week for us. Does he come back, and is he available? Jordan Doherty also went down with an injury. Does he come back, and is he available? These are big questions. Jordan Doherty and Aaron Guillen are extremely important defenders. They're also some of the best defenders, I would say, in this whole league. Whether or not Freddie Kleeman continues to stay in the starting role probably depends on what the coaching staff is seeing out of Zane Bubb in training. It's unfortunate, of course, that Forrest Lasso has his ACL tear, but we're not going to see him again in 2024. So these are the players that we have unless we go and get any more loanees. And I've just noticed that the roster cutoff date where we have to freeze it, and that is the end. That is what we have. That is coming up in a couple of days, and I forget exactly which day it was. But the point is that we don't have a lot of time if we are going to bring in any more loanees. At this point, it doesn't look very likely, just because there hasn't been a lot of chatter. Although Ryan Spalding, I guess that kind of came out of nowhere, as far as you
Yeah,
and I are aware.
that was a pretty big
So
one.
yeah, Blake Bodley was the starting center back alongside Freddie Kleeman last week and Eddie Munjoma. Blake Bodley is a lot more attacking. We're probably not going to see him continue there if Aaron Guillen is available. Eddie Munjoma has been fantastic this year because of his versatility and his availability. Availability is really, really important when we've had the injuries and when we've had the other problems that we've had, including a silly red card, let's say, in one of the most recent games. So, yeah, there are a lot of problems with chopping and changing at the back. And then, of course, I don't need to rehash any further the issues that we've had up top, other than to just say, I don't think that our problem has been chance creation. I think that our problem has actually been putting it into the net when we get into good positions.
Mhm.
And that comes with a little bit more confidence, probably. But let's hope that it also comes with a little bit more time on the training field, where the team can settle themselves down and figure out maybe something's wrong here. What is it that's wrong? Let's pinpoint this and let's focus on that. That's something that you and I probably don't have the the qualifications to point out
Oh,
for a professional soccer team, but they
speak
do.
for yourself, James. I've dabbled in career mode on FIFA. Okay,
That's true. That's
I
true. You
know how
have
to
mentioned
set
that
up.
before.
Yeah, I know how to put the fastest guys I have up top and play long balls over and spam that until I score 6 goals a game. So I think I know what I'm talking about. But I'll digress and leave it to Robbie Nielsen to figure it out, because he gets paid to do that. That's a big one. James, here's a stat on something you just mentioned. Guess who leads the league in, quote, big chances missed, according to FOTMob?
Ooh. Is it going to be a team that's near and dear to my heart?
It is. It is. It's a team we're talking about just now, actually. What a crazy coincidence. The Rowdies lead the USL Championship, according to FOTMob. Again, some of these chances can be sort of subjective. But at least according to this statistic, the Rowdies have missed 58 big chances this year. And again, when you think about big chances, we're kind of talking about those opportunities that, for lack of a better word, are big, right? Like they're the ones that you should be putting away more often than not, and the ones with the highest expected goal value. With the quality of players we have, like you said, James, maybe they're just going through a little bit of a cold streak. We've seen a good chunk of these chances being missed in the last few games. You look at your last 5, right? I kind of like to look at kind of where a team is by looking at their last 5 games. I feel like that's pretty standard. The Rowdies have 1 win in their last 5, with 2 very disappointing losses at home and 2 very meh draws away from home in their last 5. You look at those games, you look at in most of those cases, opportunities wasted, right? Again, we still got out of that Miami game with a win. We're talking about the worst team in the league, maybe ever. I think I saw a stat on X.com now that like categoric like a points per game stat put Miami as like the second worst ever USL team. Fun fact. I'm trying to remember. It was one of like the spot like Caribbean teams that existed very briefly.
Antigua and Barbuda?
It might be that one. That that was like arguably that might have had like less points per game one season. Doesn't matter. This season, again, the Rowdies have missed the Rowdies have missed 58 big chances. That could also be a skewed statistic because the Rowdies are creating a lot of chances, James. I think, like you said, it's not really a matter of a lack of chance creation. We've seen plenty of opportunities go wide, hit the post, and whatnot. And then, again, take this stat slightly with a grain of salt because your number 2 and number 3 teams on this list are Louisville and Charleston, right? That being said, they've put more of those goals away. Obviously, Louisville scored more goals than us. Louisville's actually scored 67 goals this year, James, to our 43. And Charleston scored 58. Again, they've missed less of their chances. They're putting them away in greater numbers. That's just kind of how it works. And it just seems like the Rowdy strikers, again, fantastic talent, fantastic quality, I think will kind of sort itself out. I think that's why this week in particular, as like the mental health week, came at a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we just need a quick reset, like literally a mental health break. Just relax for a little bit, right? And see where we are when we come back. You know, fun enough, actually, by the way, the fourth team on this list is Loudoun United. Apparently, they've created a ton of chances, but have missed significantly more chances than they've scored goals. So, yeah, take this stat with a grain of salt. But I think it's a really interesting thing I just came across when you mentioned that we're just really not finishing all of our chances, despite creating many of those. But if you look at the other stats, like just looking at the stats across the league, right, the Rowdies have the third most goals per match. 1.7, again, behind Louisville and Charleston. They have the fifth best goals conceded per match number at 1.1. The fourth most clean sheets, right? The third most shots on target per match. Like, these are numbers that indicate a team that's doing really well. And, you know, the table kind of points to that as well. I think you balance out those numbers and it feels like a third place team. So, all of that being put together, I feel like the numbers that we've produced this year and where we are in the table is a long-winded way of saying I think it's very justified. Like, there's not really a ton of games that we should have absolutely won. Like, when we've lost games, it's because we've played poorly and not finished our opportunities. I think where we are at the table is a fair reflection of how the season has gone, if that makes any sense. I think it's totally justifiable, like fair for how we've done. Louisville and Charleston have been better teams. And for that reason, they're ahead of us on the table. They've put away those chances, again, that we're talking about here. Maybe had less injuries than us. I'm not really too sure about the Louisville and Charleston injury situation, but I know that's something that's been kind of a theme for us. Out west, it's always kind of frustrating looking at the West Coast teams because I think if you put the Rowdies out west, we're the best team in the conference and kind of running away with it. I think they're pretty significantly better than New Mexico, despite New Mexico being on 48 points. But I could talk about that another day. More importantly, looking ahead at our next game this weekend, which, again, we'll talk about here in a minute, there's the injury question that you mentioned. The two most burning of those being Jordan Doherty and Aaron Guillen, right? Because our back line was like a makeshift thing in our last game with Bodley being one of the three back there. Some other questions to ask, like maybe Zane Bubb gets more minutes if those guys aren't available. You know, what are we going to do out on the left wing back spot now that Bodley's back and Spalding? That's a great problem to have, by the way. Blake Bodley versus Ryan Spalding for the left wing back position.
Yeah.
With Pacific Nyongabira presumably being your go-to guy on the right. So that's a great problem to think about and a great thing to have with, you know, a few games back-to-back next week. And one more I'll throw at you, James. Joshua Perez has kind of been coming off the bench a little more recently than we've seen him earlier, like throughout most of this year. Damian Rivera got the start last game and played really well. Do we ride with him in that spot? Joshua Perez keeps coming up. Do we keep him coming off the bench? There's some things to think about. There's like some movement this week. And I think the biggest things to ask and keep an eye on are those injuries, like you said. I'm really curious to see what we do with that back line if Jordan Doherty and Guillen are not available. I don't want to spoil too much by Colorado Springs talking points, but Colorado Springs is at an altitude that I can't think of right now, but it's higher than, you know, what we normally play at.
Yes.
That'll be a factor. You know, we're going to need
the dry air.
Yeah, exactly. We're going to have to worry about, you know, some depth, presumably. Like, players are going to have to come off a little earlier than normal. Lots of things to think about this point in the year. Eureka says 6,035 feet. Again, maybe not a huge factor with a week extra, you know, break and rest. But something to think about too. So all that being said, James, long-winded way of saying third place, maybe not where I would have hoped we are at this point in the year with the roster we have, you know, forwards we have. Manuel Arteaga, USL champion last year with Phoenix, incredible goal scorer. Kyle Jennings, proven goal scorer as well. You know, he just gets hot, you know, very quickly. So if we can find that rhythm, I don't see why we can't have a fantastic last 9 games. Are we going to catch up to Louisville? I mean, if you ask Robbie Nielsen, he said there's a chance, but I don't think so at this point in the year.
Right.
Charleston, 2 games in hand on them, with one of those being against Charleston coming up. Why not? I mean, it's possible. You know, 9 games left, 2 games in hand on Charleston. I don't see why we can't maybe make a run at them. So there's still time to close out in a really, really high note. Still time to figure out some of these problems going into the playoffs. Again, maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself, but James, like we do on the podcast, it's all we do is get ahead of ourselves and talk about what's coming up. So there's time here. There's things to talk about with Bodley and Spalding, Joshua Perez, and Damian Rivera, maybe. There's good problems on this team, though, right? There's some depth at some positions, really good depth at some positions, and maybe not as much as we want right now at the back line. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I truly don't know. I don't know if you've heard anything, James, about what the situation is with Doherty and Guillen. Again, I mentioned this on the last episode. I saw Guillen walking into the stadium, very fine, very good. Just casually asked him what he's doing. He says he's coming back really good. Should be back soon, quote unquote. So
okay,
we'll see how he does, how he looks. But yeah, I mean, if we're just reflecting right now on how the season's been, there's certainly moments that I wish we could have changed slightly. That would have put us in a different position, certainly kept us in the race with Louisville.
Yeah.
But the reality is we are where we are, and it's not a bad place to be. So many great players to have on this team, and I think we've been a little spoiled. I'm certainly blessed with the talent we have. So 9 games to really figure it out, to go into the playoffs with good momentum. This is a good time to have this break, James, for, again, all the reasons I've said, the mental health break, just maybe a reset. Jordan, Doherty, and Guillen having a chance to regroup and reset, having the extra week of recovery. That's huge, massive. So I think we're going to be okay. And I'm looking forward to these last 9 games, truly. I think it'll be an exciting last home stretch. And certainly a good race for second place, which is going to be important. I want to put off that away game as long as possible. And if we have to go to Louisville, we've done it before. We can win over there, sure. But I want to put off that away game as long as possible. So big last 9 games coming up here, James. Yeah. For everybody listening to, if you're listening to this live, please share with us what you're thinking about where we are. I know the roller coaster of emotions has been all over the place this year, so I truly want to hear where everybody else's head's at, James. Did I miss anything? Anything else we should mention about where we are this year? Do you have any thoughts, James, about what you would do if you're Nielsen? Talking about Blake Bodley versus Ryan Spalding, by the way. This is a really fascinating question to me. These are 2 really, really good players.
Yeah, specifically in relation to that, I know that Blake Bodley has been one of our top chance creators this year. At the same time, Ryan Spalding came in last week, and I think we only had him for 2 games. And if I'm not mistaken, I should have looked this up. I don't remember how many man of the match awards he already racked up just from 2 games, but I think that it was pretty good. Here we go. Ryan Spalding he was our man of the match so there are 2 of us, 4 options. He only got 1 out of those 2 games, but still it is not that bad.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, he was my best player in the Detroit City losing effort. So you have to imagine the one against Miami. Obviously that was a different game because they are, without trying to be rude to anyone, they're just not a good team. They're just not a good team. So it's hard to go based off of that. But I would say that right now, just in my mind, Ryan Spalding has the upper hand. We will see, obviously, how it turns out and how it goes from there, probably this weekend. But yeah, I would lean on him first if it were up to me. And Blake Bodley also can play. We have seen him play as a central midfielder. So I don't know if
back line guy, apparently.
Yeah, I think that I would probably, if it came to it, I would probably want him to be in the central midfield more than the center of the defense. But either way, there are options for pretty much everybody in a lot of different positions, as long as they are available and not out injured. So that is where we are looking for this weekend to see who exactly is available. All right. Well, with all that out of the way, I do want to highlight one more time today that RBLR's next watch party is Saturday, September 21st. It starts at 6:45 for a game versus Charleston Battery, which is at 7:30. Please join us at Berry House Beer Company off the Ybor Strip. There are award-winning beers there, literally award-winning beers. So please come check them out. There will be beer pitcher specials if you would like to take part in that. If you would not, there are still things for you because we will have a halftime swag giveaway, as well as ourselves, a live pregame show, and lots of fun to be had for everybody. So please come help us make that the most fun watch party that it can be on Saturday, September 21st. You will get lots more reminders here and on social media beforehand. Don't forget about it. All right, Carlos, now we have to talk about the game coming up this Saturday against Colorado Springs. Take it away.
By the way, just looking up and reflecting on Antigua Barracuda as a soccer club, what a sick name, Antigua Barracuda FC.
Yeah.
God, sorry. I feel like that needs more attention. They existed from 2011 to 2013. Oh man, what a period of time that was in lower division soccer. Anyway,
I kind of wish that it was still around, but I imagine that it was very expensive.
Yeah, Puerto Rico FC was another fun one that I was stuck around. Oh,
Same,
probably an expensive one too. Okay, James. More importantly, rest in peace to our fallen lower division soccer clubs. I hope they're doing well up in lower division soccer heaven. A team that is still around, Colorado Springs. We're playing them this weekend, Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the best of the time zones. We're going out to Colorado Springs, Colorado, a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful place. By all accounts. I'm really sad I haven't had a chance to get out there for the game. I'm excited for this one. I hope to get out there one day for the away game over there. This is a team in pretty good form, James. They're 6th out west with 38 points from 26 games. They are behind Memphis and Las Vegas. Again, their recent form is getting better. They did win their 2 games last week. But before that, they certainly have had a mixed bag of results. 2 wins in their last 5. That includes 2 losses to New Mexico, 1 loss against Mexico United, 1 loss to North Carolina, and a 2-2 draw against Pittsburgh. This is a really fascinating team, James, that started off the year winless for several games. I'm trying to remember how many that was. And then came back and wrung out like 7 or 8 unbeaten to put them back in the mix. Again, now certainly for the playoffs. Battling for higher positions in the playoff standings out west. It's a really interesting team with one of my favorite players in the entire league that I'll mention in a second. They usually prefer to play in a 4-2-3-1 with Christian Herrera in net. In front of him, you'll have COS Santos, Matt Mahoney, Valentes Pierre, and Matt Real. They will sit behind Speedy Williams, a fantastic, fantastic player in this league, and someone else, probably, possibly, hopefully, Aiden Rocha. Georgetown legend, fantastic central midfielder. Oh, love this kid. One of the best people I've ever met playing professional soccer. They have their 3 switched, but we could see Zach Zandy, Jonas Fjellberg, and possibly Yosuke Henya or Tyreek McGee. Also, by the way, they're moving this around. They sold Malik Foster very recently. Great stats, by the way. Ronaldo Damas is likely to start up top. He has 11 goals and 1 assist. Solid numbers for Ronaldo, who apparently plays for Colorado Springs. Again, 11 goals and 1 assist at this point in the year. Hanya and Fjellberg have 3 goals this year. Zandy has 4 assists, and he leads and chance is created with Santos, Williams, and my GOAT, Aiden Rocha. This will be a good game to make up some points on the road, James. This is a team that I think we can beat. Playing in altitude, albeit it's not like a huge difference at 6,000 feet, but it's certainly going to be noticeable, and I think it'll take a toll on some of our players. We'll see. I think the rest week here that we just had will be really, really helpful to go out and play in Colorado, having been able to take the extra week of recovery. So I think all things considered, this game is just about as good as it can be for us situationally outside of the game itself. I think we're coming in with as great a context as we can. Again, the extra week of rest, extra week of recovery for the injuries. This is a huge, huge, huge opportunity to start bouncing back and really head into this last part of the game with a win in Colorado Springs. Fantastic game. I think it's going to be a good one. Again, Aiden Rocha is one of my favorite people in this league. Obviously, he was a classmate of mine at Georgetown and a fantastic, fantastic defensive midfielder. He can move the ball so well. He's got so much talent. He can kind of boss that central midfield with Devin Williams, Speedy Williams himself. That's a really good dynamic too they have in the central midfield. It's going to be really interesting to see. I haven't actually watched a lot of their games, but Speedy Williams and Aiden Rocha together in the central midfield is fascinating stuff. And I think it could be a real challenge for the Rowdies to break that down. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. I think we're going to play a lot of balls out wide, James. It's going to be hard to kind of run it through the middle against this team. Colorado Springs is a good enough team to kind of like establish themselves early on. They're going to want to come out and attack at home. This won't be a team that sits back. Based on the little bit I know about Colorado Springs, this won't be a team that sits back, especially playing at home. We have had a lot of games where we play teams that kind of feel like they need to play on the counterattack against us. I don't think this will be one of them, James. And I think that benefits us, truly. I think we struggle when we play teams that kind of sit back and absorb pressure. A more open, free-flowing game will be obviously more entertaining, but more importantly, better for the Rowdies' play style. And hopefully we can keep up with the pace of these young guys that Colorado Springs has. In the altitude, I think will be good. James, what do you have to say about this game before we give our initial predictions?
Yep. Well, there are a couple of things to note. I actually wrote this last week and I didn't realize all the timing, so I got a little bit of this wrong. But as you said, Malik Foster has been sold, and that had not happened when I originally put this up there. So I was furiously changing my notes here as we were talking earlier in this episode. Either way, he is gone, and so are his 4 goals. And if I'm not mistaken, 3 assists on the season. That means that Colorado Springs have had to change the middle 3, like you already mentioned. Previously, they were kind of going with Jonas Fjällberg, Zach Zandy, and Malik Foster as those 3. Yosuke Hanya was the one who stepped in immediately when Foster went out. So it's not like they don't have a bad play, or they don't have a good player to step in afterwards. He was, I think, on the same number of goals, 3 goals for him. So Hanya is still going to be an important player for them. Tyreek McGee supposedly had a very good game last week. In fact, Colorado Springs played 2 games last week, and according to John Morrissey, they not only outscored their opponents 7-1, but, and I will just quote here because it is easier to do that, between the 2 games, Chambers being their manager, Chambers side conceded 1 goal and just 1.5 XG. So it should be noted that they actually possibly have improved things since selling Malik Foster. They're going to be very aggressive when they don't have the ball. They will be trying to press and win it back against us in good positions. That is another thing that can hurt us, just like it can hurt any team. But presumably, we are a team that is good enough to play through an opposition press and try and suck them in to our own end so that we can actually play through that and get past it and give ourselves some space on the other side, which would be closer to their goal, and hopefully give ourselves some more good chances that we can find a goal. I'm interested to see how we do with the altitude there, and also it just kind of, when you're used to the humidity of Florida and you go out to Colorado like I did in June of this year, you may end up just getting nosebleeds walking around because it is so dry. So it'll be just one more thing for the Rowdies players to get a little bit more used to as they try to get through this game and huff and puff their way through 90 minutes. Hopefully we can withstand their pressure and onslaught when they don't have the ball and we are trying to build possession. That's going to be the biggest thing, I guess, from Colorado Springs. When we have the ball, they will be trying to win it back and they will be trying to create scoring chances off of that. And if we can defend it, obviously, or if we can just pass through it, then that will bode well for us, not only in this game, but I think potentially in games to come. So with all of that said, Carlos, I think that we are ready now to hop into the predictions, and I will let you lead it off.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good game, James. It's going to be a fun one. I think it'll be pretty open. I do think we have the better squad, player for player. As much, as I love Aiden Rocha, I think we just kind of out-talent them, on an on-paper level. On the field, it's going to be a little tougher than that, obviously. We've talked about the altitude. It's their home field. They know how to play there. It looks like a really pretty stadium, by the way. I really do want to get out there at some point. It'll be a good one. I think it'll be open. I think we're going to win this one 2-0 is my prediction, and I'm hopeful. I think our back line will have a good performance. I'm kind of banking on at least one of either Jordan Doherty or Aaron Guillen being back and playing and, allowing Blake Bodley to not be on the back line. Yeah, maybe Zane Bubb gets minutes too. Kind of free up Eddie Manjoma to come in later if he doesn't want to play on the back line. If Robbie Nilsson doesn't want to play on the back line. There's a lot of potential for movement here. when with this extra week, I think it'll be good for this injury recovery. I think it'll be good for allowing Robbie Nielsen to kind of play the players he wants to play in the system he wants to play. I think we're going to be all right in this one. That being said, it'll be a tough game. I think it will be very open, like I've said, and it'll be tight. I think that second goal comes like later in the game. We score an early goal in the first half. That second goal is kind of like the nail in the coffin later in the game. Yeah, that's what I'm going to say.
Okay.
We need Cal Jennings and Arteaga to really like kind of lock in through the last 9 games. I think hopefully 1-1 is my prediction.
Yeah, I would like to see that. That would be fantastic for both of their confidence, obviously, and it would mean that what they were working on the training field has paid off as well. All very positive there. Eureka has also joined you in predicting a win, a 2-1 win to be specific, although I am ever the downer in choosing a 1-1 draw. I still think that a point would be good here, considering, but Carlos has given me the 2 thumbs down. So I will just leave it there and say, if you've got any predictions, please let us know. I will turn it over real quick to one Instagram comment from Gym Class Hero on Instagram. What's up, boys? Great show as always. Do you think we're better at goalie this year than previous years? This also plays into our discussion before, where we were leading into how we are looking before the playoffs start. And I think that, I think that this is kind of up in the air. I think that Jordan Farr has a lot of positive traits. For one thing, he's very good with his feet, and that's something that the team has emphasized. I know that he has 1 assist on the year, so that's kind of fun. Would be cool if that could turn into more, but that's a lot to ask for a goalkeeper, obviously. So it's not a demand I'm making. But at the same time, I think that we definitely have had players in that position who have had more standout years. One that immediately stands out to me, and perhaps I'm remembering this wrong just because of how crazy the season went and how crazily everything went that year. But to me, I remember Evan Loro as something of a brick wall in net, and I would like a little bit more brick wall ishness. There we go, wallishness to Jordan Farr, and I think that he's very commanding of his box. I think that he is very confident in coming out to get the ball, but he also does miss it sometimes. Literally, we have seen him come out of his box to try and clear a ball and whiff on that. I think twice. One of those at least was a goal. But either way, that's something that I would like to see improved as we go.
Here's a comment on the Evan Loro brick wall-edness of that 2021 year too. I think he had what to this day feels, and still I think numbers-wise points to being the best Rowdies back line we've had. Which was again we still have 2 of those players, by the way, Aaron Guillen and Forrest Lasso, but the third one was Jordan Scarlett, who seemed to kind of have a bit of a fall off after he left the Rowdies, and kind of jumped around teams. I know he was at Louisville. I don't really know where he is now, honestly. Hartford. Aaron Guillen, Jordan Scarlett, and Forrest Lasso. That back 3 was a 3 that had this is probably the most important thing right here I'm about to say. Very little in the injury department for those back 3. It was consistent, like almost the entire year. Forrest Lasso, Jordan Scarlett, and Aaron Guillen, with a midfield that supported them really well defensively, and Jordan Doherty, and Lawrence Wyke. That was an impenetrable like back 3 with 2 incredible defensive midfielders in front of them. Jordan Doherty, again, now we've seen him more play on the back line, but when he was in that central midfield with Lawrence Wyke next to him, or interchanging, it was really hard for an opponent to break them down. So Evan Loro had all those guys in front of him before the attacker even got to Evan Loro, right? And then on top of that, Evan Loro was a fantastic goalie. So that's why I think that Evan Loro 2021 year had that sort of impenetrable aspect to it, because that back line just played out of their mind as well. And Jordan Scarlett was certainly the unsung hero of that 3. He had a fantastic year as well, like really, really great year that year, I remember. And it was really sad to see him go because I felt like he had more left for this team. But yeah, I think the Rowdies, just, circle back to the comment itself. I think the Rowdies have had a lot of great goalies in the last several years. CJ Cochran had a great run with the Rowdies.
Yeah.
Evan Loro, maybe the most memorable. We have had Connor Sparrow come in here and play a fantastic season last year. Obviously, you have Jordan Farr now. Am I missing one? Raiko Rosarena had a couple games, and even like Phil Brano when he's come in has had memorable moments, right? Like
Yes,
that
he
penalty
has.
kill, right? So I think we've been really blessed in terms of the goalie department. To this day, I have nightmares about the Evan Loro like torn ACL celebration. Man, like, oh, who knows what could have happened if he stuck around and was able to be injury free for that championship game against Orange County. So that being said, Jordan Farr, I think is punch for punch, like up there with all of those goalies I just mentioned, talent wise. By the way, he might, like, honestly, like in terms of his toolkit and like his reputation coming into this year, he might be up there in terms of maybe the best. I don't know if that's a hot take. Like, he truly has an incredible talent level that I think I could say is maybe the number one out of all those goalies I just listed. That being said, he's had some like kind of like goofball moments this year. Maybe some moments where he's a lot of position uncharacteristically. So maybe this year he's just not had the year that maybe we would have expected from him in terms of incredible highlight reel saves and just consistency. But I do think he's like up there in terms of the best goalies we've had in the last few years. But again, we've been really lucky in that department. So I think it's pretty hard to point to. But yeah, man, that Evan Loro 2021 back line that they had going on was incredible stuff. Incredible. And it's really interesting that we still have two of those back line guys. But the injuries and the injuries more than anything is what's messed up the consistency that I think would help a guy like Jordan Farr to have a year that maybe we would be talking about a lot better,
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
I think that's a really important point to this, because obviously a goalkeeper is not just, you can have a goalkeeper who can perform the way, let's say, Martin Paz did in the Rowdies game versus FC Dallas in the Open Cup earlier this year, where we had a lot of shots and he stood on his head that night. But it's unsustainable to do that over the course of a whole season. Even if Jordan Farr were standing on his head, you can't do that if your players in front of you are letting you down. And we've had so many changes to the back line. So I think that that's actually super important, Carlos. That is very good. That is a very good point.
I want to throw that in there because I've seen some Jordan Farr slander this year on Twitter. And I'm just like, man, like he's such a good goalie. I think we really did make the right signing going out and getting him. And I don't think it's like close. I think that was the best goalie on the market. So I was really excited, and I still am excited to have him on this team. The backline consistency, I think, is the biggest thing there. But James, I digress. We'll save the rest of that for another day.
Well, no, I think you're spot on. But either way, we'll leave it there because the point is succinct and it is made. Let's do our extra time segment here and start off by saying that the U.S. men's national team, as I mentioned earlier, have 2 games coming up this weekend, first on Saturday and then on Tuesday. Let's go USA. Let's see how this goes. And I'm really hoping that Mauricio Pochettino actually gets announced this week. Carlos, I will turn the next point over to you because it is of your interest.
Oh, yeah. The greatest national team in the world has 2 games upcoming. Ecuador against Brazil on Friday in a banger of a game. Maybe the worst Brazil squad in terms of like performances. No, I don't think roster wise. I think that's a stretch. Insane names on that roster still, but performances and cohesiveness, maybe the worst Brazil side in a little while. Ecuador has never gotten any points in Brazil in World Cup qualifiers. Not a win, not a tie, nothing. I think this is certainly the time for that. A new coach for Ecuador, Sebastián Becasese, an Argentinian guy with a pretty good reputation, was Sampaoli's Sampaoli's assistant coach for the Argentinian national team. Won an international cup with a pretty small team in Buenos Aires, Defensa y Justicia. He was able to win the Copa Sudamericana with them. So he has some great accolades, great reputation. Younger coach with great energy, good head on his shoulders. This is quite the challenge for a debut game in Brazil for him with this Ecuador national team. I'm excited to see what he can do, though. He also, by the way, changed up the roster call-up a little bit the Ecuador team currently is a young team. He went even younger somehow. Brought out some kids from around the world. A lot of kids playing in the Belgian league. A few from MLS. Patrickson Delgado, the FC Dallas player who had the golazo against us in the U.S. Open Cup game a couple months ago. He made the call up. I'd like to say that goal he scored against the Rowdies put him on the radar again.
We can say that. We can say whatever we want.
We can say whatever we want. Yeah. So he got called up to the national team. Like some really great young talent on this team. He's really trending young. Bringing in Enter Valencia back still. Trusting him to lead the team still with that captain energy that he has. Just a really fascinating team that is certainly amongst the best in South America. They currently sit in, let me fact check myself. I want to say 5th place in the qualifiers. Actually 1 point ahead of Brazil, who is in 6th place. It's going to be a pretty interesting game on Friday. Keep in mind that with the expanded World Cup, the top 6 teams in South America automatically qualify, with the 7th place team playing in a playoff. So it's a lot of teams making it. It's going to be easier, but you can't really slow down too much. You never really know in South America. They could switch up on a dime. So it's going to be a great one against Brazil. On Friday. Peru on Tuesday, which should be an easy win, hopefully for Ecuador at home. Peru is terrible right now, James. Oh my goodness, this is probably one of the worst Peru teams we've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
The bottom 3 to 4 teams in South America, there's a big gap between the top 6 and the bottom 4 right now. Paraguay, Chile, Bolivia, Peru are amongst having some of their worst moments in the last several decades. Brazil, is having a bad moment, but it's still Brazil, right?
Right, exactly.
So Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Brazil, all having good teams. Brazil, okay, but those top 5, Venezuela is having a great team. Ecuador has a great team. Colombia, obviously, South America is fascinating right now in the world of soccer games. Keep an eye on these qualifiers and watch all the games you can because they're going to be good.
I think that is a good place to leave that point. Watch them all if you can, and I will certainly be doing so. Another couple games that you can watch if you have the time, if you have the attention span. We are listing a lot of soccer, I know, but the U.S. Youth National Team contingent continues as the under-20 women's national team is playing in the under-20 World Cup that is currently going on actually in Colombia. So we lost our first game against Spain. It should be noted that Spain has won everything on the women's side recently. They have, except for the Olympics. Obviously, we won that at the senior level. But on the men's side, the Spanish team is also killing it. So that's very good competition. And going out and losing to Spain in your first game kind of sucks. But honestly, that's not so bad. Let's hope that the U.S. women's national team at the under-20 level can win their next 2 games and then go on and hopefully make the final and win that, even if it is against Spain, which honestly, at this point, it might as well be. Tune into those. I believe they are on Fox channels and Fox Sports channels. The last thing that we wanted to hit on, very interesting, and Eureka brought this to our attention. Thank you, producer, for helping us out here. Neil Collins, if you remember that name, he was appointed head coach at Raith Rovers of the Scottish second tier on a 3-year contract. If you haven't heard of Raith Rovers, it's okay. They play, like I said, in the Scottish second tier in a town called Kirkcaldy. It's not spelled the way that you think it is based off of how I said that. But I was in Scotland last year, and my wife and I saw their stadium when we were on the train going to another city, Dundee, where my dad is from. So Kirkcaldy is an interesting town, and their team, I'm just being honest, going through the roster here, it's not all of that compelling, but it is better than where they're sitting right now. They are currently 9th of 10 teams in the second division after 4 games. It's very early, and I just saw in some other publication that their manager was controversially sacked after just 1 month. And I said, I guess that is kind of weird. Little did I know, it was probably because Neil Collins was available to them and they had reached out to him. Neil Collins is a guy who has a pretty good resume as a manager, obviously a very good resume as a player as well. I think that Raith Rovers saw a chance to bring somebody in who could get them higher up the table, and they went ahead and did it. So I'm still going to obviously wish him the best of luck there. I hope that he can bring in some younger Scottish players and turn their fortunes around that way. I know that Rangers need to get some of their players out on loan so that they can get some game time. But that's enough of a Scottish soccer jaunt for now. Good luck to Neil Collins and Wraith Rovers in the 24-25 season. Carlos, are we missing anything? Is there anything else that we need to cover?
Not that I can think of.
All right, there we go.
Well, my new team in Scotland.
There we go. But thank you, listeners, for tuning in. We appreciate when you do. And sometimes you even get a little bit more than you asked for, like a little bit of a Scottish soccer lesson. Please follow RBLR Sports on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Threads, anywhere you are. We are at RBLR Sports. I'm mostly on Twitter at RBLR James K. If you have any interest in following me, Carlos, what about you?
At Carlos GPA 10 on Twitter, where I will ruthlessly make fun of Barnsley FC every time they lose a game. That's all I'm going to do on Twitter, as well as, pushing USF propaganda this weekend when they beat Alabama. It's going to be a great time. Come join me at Carlos GPA 10 on Twitter.
You heard it here first, folks. And of course, please like and subscribe to our podcast. You can get the full experience on YouTube. We are also on Spotify, the iHeartRadio app, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Basically, anywhere you are, we are too. Whether that be podcasts, social media, whatever, we are there. So please join us. Now, for another game coming up away from home, come on, you Rowdies.
Thank you for tuning into this presentation by RBLR Sports. On your way out of the stadium, please remember to like and subscribe.